Okay.
So maybe in the interest of time, we can just proceed, Manoj.
Yeah.
Welcome everybody. So today we are going to be taking a very interesting topic on drafting and managing commercial contracts. So in the broader scheme of things, when it comes to contracts management, we are going to be specifically focusing on commercial contracts. So the presenter for today's session is Manoj. Manoj Nair. Manoj, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your surname correctly.
Yeah, Manoj Nair. Nair, actually. Yeah, it's all right.
Nair, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
it's like a what?
Yeah, okay. So Manoj comes with extensive industry experience. He's been, in various continents. He's also been very much involved in training, in the training space, in the education and training space with various institutions. So in terms of this course, it's simply a review. It's not a full course. So we're just gonna give you a glimpse of what this course entails. After which, then, if you feel this is something that you want, you need a course certificate, or you need to attend a full course, then you can feel free to join us. We'll actually announce the dates, but it's going to be somewhere in November. So we'll give you the dates. The registration link will remain the same. So after this session, and if you're also, watching the recorded version of this session, we are going to be able to, give you a link where you can register for the course, and just more details in terms of what the course entails and various options that you can take if you need to be certified. So with that being said, needless to say, I'm going to be your moderator for this session today. So if you've got any questions, comments, I'm going to be Manoj wingman, so to speak, just to make sure that we are not missing anything. So with that being said, Manoj, over to you. You can take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Truman.
Right.
Good morning, everyone. What we are going to learn today is a very interesting topic, which is drafting and managing commercial contracts. And since contracts, we deal with contracts with in and out, as far as in and out of our life. We can say anything and everything that we do is all about contracts. It's like if you buy if you buy an air ticket, you go to the departmental store, you go to a doctor, sit in a restaurant. Everything is contract. So we look at what we look at is this is usually a 3-day course, and what the course describes is the first level where we talk about the drafting fundamentals, which is about how to convert a term sheet into a contract. This is something which we'll be talking about as far as the contract is. So a term sheet is nothing but a document which probably if you are new to legal contracts segment, if your supervisor gives you a document saying that the asset price is, we're going to buy an asset or a company, the asset price is, let's say, $1 million, and we have agreed to some outline as far as the transaction is concerned, and we want you to draft a contract. So the building block concept talks about what are the fundamentals as far as contracting is concerned. We will see this when we get into the course. It's a very interesting topic. How do you allocate risk in a contract is also something which we would talk about as far as drafting fundamentals is concerned. The second topic which we would cover in the course is how do you structure your contract. So structuring your contract is how do you ensure that what should be the start of your contract, how do you start it in the introduction, the preamble, how you should draft it, the recitals in a contract, how should that be drafted, what are the best practices. We'll be sharing that with you, international best practices as far as structuring the contract. How should your operative parts of the contract look like? That is something which we will be sharing with you in the course outline. So it will give you all in and out how you best practices as far as how do you structure your contract, remove that which is archaic or irrelevant as far as, because some of us still follow the old style of writing contracts. So structuring is something which we will focus on as in the next session as far as the course is concerned. The next part is we talk about rule of interpretation. So we are talking about how do courts interpret the contract. If you write something in the contract, and what is the rules for interpretation, which I'll be speaking about in the course outline. That's also a very interesting topic which you would want to know. What happens if you write something handwritten on a contract, which one will prevail, the handwritten or the typed version? Or sometimes we also write what will prevail, whether it's a GCC conditions. I'm sure some of you heard of. If you are dealing with commercial contracts, you will talk about the GCC conditions, which is the general conditions of contract, and the special conditions of contract. Now, in case there's a conflict between two general condition, GCC, as I just mentioned, and the SEC, which one will prevail? So these are things which I would be talking about in the course, and that's a very interesting line as to which one would prevail over the other. And then there is something known as order of precedence, priority of documents, which we would look at as far as the contract is concerned. So these are things which you would want to see in your contract. And again, that's a very interesting topic. Moving on from there, we will be talking about breach and material breach of contract. So breach of contract is what happens when if you fail to perform the contract, and material breach is where something substantial happens to the contract. So which one should you have in your contract? Should you define material breach in your contract? Will that be helpful to you as far as the contract is concerned? Is something which we will talk about in the course. The next thing that we talk about is termination. That's again a very interesting topic. Termination has an impact on the contract. If you terminate the contract early, you could have a legal claim from your contractors. How do you ensure that you do the termination? If you were to terminate the contract, what steps should you take as far as termination of the contract is concerned? So that's something which you should, I would say, look into, because that would protect the interest of the company, because you wouldn't want to expose your company to a risk as far as taking a wrong decision or taking a decision without giving a thought and terminate the contracts, and you would land up in a situation where there's a claim sitting on your head from your contractor. So I'll be sharing with you best practices, tools, mechanism as to ensuring that you won't end up in a situation where you would find that you have a claim from your contractor. The next thing is I'm talking about in the course is drafting techniques, contract language. Contract language is what kind of language should you use in the contract. There are some words in the contract which could be very confusing. For example, when you use the word reasonable, sometimes when you use the word and/or if you use the word including but not limited to, these are some words notwithstanding. Now, when you use these words very often without giving a thought to what they mean, this could create a lot of confusion in the contract. So I'll be sharing with you what best language should you use when you're writing something. This language can also be used when you write your correspondence. When you're writing to your contractor, when the supplier, what language should you use? Again, the intent is to protect the interest of the company. So if you write well, with the right words, this will equip you at this. You will understand that you're not exposing your company to risk. So I'll share with you some inputs as to how you write as far as a claim is concerned, or you can use the same and stretch it to your emails. So that will also help you. So if you use it in your emails, you will understand what is the best way to write to a vendor supplier and ensure that your company's interest is protected. Right. So that's something which I would write, talk about in the contract language. And then I'm talking about the next session, which is very interesting, which is talking about allocation of risk. How do you allocate risk in a contract? You ensure that you minimize risk for your company. Like, how do you transfer risk? If you are a client, you transfer risk to your contractor transfer risk to subcontractor, right? So how do you do that? So there's clauses like assignment clause. There are clauses like indemnity clause, force majeure. You have clauses like consequential laws. So these are clauses, and some of them are non-insurable. Like if you look at a consequential loss clause, this is a non-insurable loss. So if you ever agree to that in the contract, your company could be out of business. So we will be sharing with you best practices as well. How do you transfer risk? What are the clauses that you should agree, you should not agree to? And if you ever agree to, where should you draw a line, the borderline as far as the contract clauses are concerned? So this is again a very interesting topic which we'll talk about. The next is we talk about, I'm sure in commercial contracts, all companies, if you enter, even in supply chain, the first thing that you enter into with your supplier is a non-disclosure agreement. Now, what are the best practices when you enter into a non? Is there a risk when I enter into a non-disclosure agreement? I'll be sharing that with you. Is there a risk when you issue a letter of intent? Many companies, excuse me, many companies, they issue a letter of intent to their suppliers, vendors. I'll be sharing with you international best practices as far as letter of intent is concerned. How should you write your letter of intent? When do you issue a letter of intent? What is the difference between a letter of intent, letter of award? What is the difference between letter of intent, letter of acceptance, letter of award? These are all sometimes very confusing, and it could actually, sometimes I've seen senior managers getting confused with when to issue what. And I'll be sharing with you when you should issue a letter of intent, when you should issue a letter of acceptance. Is there a risk? And what are the best practices, international best practices, when you're writing a letter of intent, MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, Non-Disclosure Agreement? So all these documents are essential part of your supply chain or your commercial contracts. And this is something which I will be sharing with you when we run this course. The next one is guidelines for drafting SLA. So sometimes you enter into a service. SLA is a service agreement, and MSA is a master service agreement. So what are the best practices when you write an SLA and a master service agreement? What should you write in your performance metrics is something which I'll be sharing with you when you write your SLA, service level agreement, and master service agreement. Again, these documents are something which you cannot ignore. This is a part of commercial contracts. So you would be dealing with master service agreements, and I'll be sharing with you when should you enter into a master service agreement. If you ever enter into SLA, how do you develop a performance metrics or a performance standard as far as SLA is concerned? Now, the next one is I'll also be sharing with you guidelines for scope of work. Now, I can share with you my experience. I'm almost 23 years of experience as far as legal experience is concerned, legal and contracts. And I can share with you a lot of misunderstanding or claims in contracts happen due to misunderstanding, or if you misread the scope of work. The scope of work is a very important document in your contract. So if the scope is not understood properly, the chances are the contract would go for a toss. Now, what do I mean when I say scope of work? Scope of work means what you want your vendor supplier to do. Right. So that's something very interesting. Like I'll share with you a very, very interesting story, which will give you some input why scope is important. Now, one of my clients, they were a civil engineering company, and they wanted to buy IT software. So they prepared scope for IT. Or you could take a reverse scenario where an IT company wants to do civil work, construction of a compound wall, and they prepared scope of work. So if you are an IT company preparing a scope for civil engineering work, the chances are that your scope will go wrong because it's not your expertise. For an IT company to prepare scope for civil work, I can guarantee that things can go wrong. So what did this client of mine do? And I'll share with you. They asked the client, and they asked us a vendor, what best can you do? Please share your, this is what we are looking at, but you tell me what you can do best. Now, and what they did is, if your contract, which I will share with you, if your contract value is very high, and if you anticipate that the scope can go wrong, or if you have no knowledge about the scope, you can hire a consultant or an expert. The expert will help you in weighting the scope for you or reviewing the scope for you. Right? Do not indulge in a practice where you are not aware of the scope, and then you prepare the scope, and I can guarantee that you are preparing, your contract will definitely land up in a litigation or arbitration. Why? Because the scope was prepared with someone who did not understand the nitty-gritty of scope. So what do we do in the scope work? I can share with you when we run the course. I'll be sharing with you I can share with you the best practices as to how do you write a scope, what language should be used, what words. There's something known as catch-all words, which you should avoid when you're writing a scope. And finally, I also talked about, I'll be sharing with you guidelines. Now, there's no universal formula for drafting scope, excuse me, but I will be sharing with you some excellent guidelines, international practices, including my expertise as far as how do you draft a scope, which you should hand over to your vendor supplier when you're doing contracts. And the last one is dispute resolution. So I'll be talking about dispute resolution, some best practices, because my experience has been, my intent to work with my vendor. So if I have a vendor supplier, my intent is not to pick up a brawl or fight with my vendor. My intent is to get the work done. If I ever pick up, a dispute with my vendor supplier, my contract has gone for a toss, relationship management has gone for a toss, and this would have, I would say, a catastrophic effect on the project, because the project delivery the dates have got delayed, project cost goes up if there's a delay in the project. So a lot of things could happen if you ever land up in dispute. So I will share with you how you need to negotiate, how you ensure that dispute is your last resort as far as a contract is concerned. So that's in a nutshell the 3-day course talks about as far as the drafting and managing of commercial contracts is concerned. Now, I can also share with you some inputs, as far as this is a warm-up session which I Truman, is anyone online, or it's only me and there's only one person?
Right. Yes, there is. But you can proceed, Manoj.
Okay. So normally what I do, I usually make my workshops interactive, and if I don't see any name here, but I'll share. This is a warm-up session which I take with before I start my session. Like, for example, whether a letter of intent is an agreement or a contract. This is very important. Is it an agreement or a contract? A memorandum of understanding. Is it an agreement or a contract? RFP, RFQ. When do you issue an RFP? When do you issue an RFQ? Request for proposal. Now, what is the difference between RFP? Now, all those who are in supply chain procurement, you would be dealing with all these documents: RFP, request for proposal, request for quotation, request for information, which is not here, expression of interest. You will be dealing with all these documents, and I'll be sharing with you best practices when we run the course. What is it? Whether it's whether an RFP is a contract. I'm sure you would have your own answers to it, but you should know what is this risk if I issue an RFP, RFQ. What are the best practices? Purchase order. When do I issue a purchase order? When do I issue a work order? Whether a purchase order is a contract, whether a work order is a contract, right? I'll be sharing with you some pointers which you can take forward as far as purchase order and NDA, whether it's an agreement or contract. I remember one of the participants in my workshop was asked a question whether an NDA is an agreement or contract, and she said it's an agreement. She lost the interview because she had no idea how an agreement becomes a contract. Although we call an NDA is an agreement, it's a contract, right? But why? Well, that was a big question where she lost. I think I discussed purchases. So this is something which you should know if you are in procurement, supply chain, dealing with commercial contracts. This is something which you can avoid in a business. All companies issue purchase order. I know that for sure. Some of the companies issue work order. So I mean, what am I issuing? Is it a contract? Is there a concern? Is there a risk when I issue a purchase order? All these things would end up in your. I think we should have. If you are a commercial manager, supply chain manager, you should have clarity as far as the concepts are concerned. And this is just as I said, one of the slides in the session. When you run the full course, you will get an opportunity to learn and discuss in detail as to what these documents are all about. Right. So that's one aspect. And why do companies enter a contract? This is something very fundamental, which I asked most of my participants, and I'll share with you. Most of them said, the contract has to be binding and the parties have to understand their rights and obligations. But more than that, one of the primary reasons that companies, corporates, organizations enter into a contract is to transfer, distribute, is to control, transfer, and distribute risk, right? And this is something which we will learn in the session, in the 3-day session which we will have. How do corporates they control, they transfer and distribute risk? What clauses transfer risk? What clauses distribute risk? And risk is something which we'll talk about. I'll also be talking about risk management if that is a subject of interest to you guys, whoever is attending the course. So risk management is something which you would want to learn, and I can share some inputs on risk management. But one of the reasons one of the primary reasons that companies enter into contract, as I said, apart from the fact that they want the obligations to go writing, is to control, transfer, and distribute risk. Right. So that's one aspect. And one more teaser which I want to leave you guys with is the difference between warranty and guarantee. Right. Now, this is a very important, I mean, my experience has, this is a very important concept. My experience has been there is a lot of confusion with this word warranty and guarantee, although it's interchangeably used. People use warranty as guarantee and guarantee as warranty. So a lot of confusion when I say what does it mean, and I've seen most of my participants also say that guarantee means a replacement, which it is not. It does not mean replacement. But this is something which I will be sharing with you guys in the what is the difference between warranty. I'll be sharing with you what warranty should you take from your supplier, vendor, and I'll also be sharing with you how to use guarantee in the right word. Also, some of my participants I have seen is they also mess around with the word bond. Like there's a confusion between the word performance guarantee and performance bond. Right. So I will be giving you insight as to what a bond means. Do not mix the word bond, warranty, guarantee. These are all different words to be used in an appropriate manner as far as a contract is concerned. Right. So that's something which I would leave you guys with a thought to I mean, before I wind up, I want to share with you. This workshop will help you understand a lot of concepts, commercial concepts, which you would want to have a clear understanding of, and it will help you write contracts properly. It will make you understand the risk involved in the contract, because I keep telling to my participants, I mean, globally I've done a lot of trainings, and I keep telling all of them, the more you understand your business, the better manager you are. The more you understand your risk of it. If I don't understand the risk of my business, I cannot advise my management. I have no clue what the risk is. I cannot. Now, if you understand the risk of your business, you are a better manager. And this course will provide you with a gateway to understand the risk in the business. Right? So thank you, everyone, for those who have been listening to me. And that's it, Truman. I'm done with it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Manoj. So I think now everyone who is part of this call, or if you're watching the recording, you do have, just a high level view in terms of what the course entails. So we're just going to leave it at that for today. So feel free to go ahead and register for the upcoming course on drafting and managing commercial contracts, which is going to be held in November. So we are going to announce the date on the advert. So that would be on LinkedIn, all our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. But those who are also part of the Supply Chain Academy database would also get an email in terms of their exact dates. So it is a 3-day course, like Manoj mentioned in the beginning. So we look forward to hosting you and adding value to all the participants that are going to be attending this very interesting session in November. So commercial contracts, you do not really need to be in supply chain or to be a contracts manager, procurement manager, supply chain manager.
Absolutely.
If you work with legal commercial contracts, this session is for you. You might be in logistics, you might be in procurement, you might be in shipping, you might be an engineer, like Manoj was saying, but you work closely with the commercial contracts team, whatever the structure of the business is. So it could be procurement, it could be contracts management, it could be in some companies, you'd find that the legal department actually runs with, everything contracts. So if in any way you are involved with contracts, or maybe you have an interest, you're an entrepreneur, you've got all these legal contracts in place, but you don't really understand what they mean and the implications thereof in terms of risk, in terms of, all these things that Manoj was talking about. This session is for you. You might also be fairly new in supply chain. You've heard of contracts management, commercial contracts, and you're just curious, in terms of what this means and how you could benefit from this course to, develop yourself in this area. So this course basically applies to pretty much everyone. If you're in business, you don't necessarily need to be in supply chain per se. Like I said, you might be in real estate, you might be, in project management, you might be, in the risk side of the business, you're managing risk. So guess what? Contracts, the commercial contracts, one way or the other, it also affects what you do. So I'm just going to leave it at that for now. Manoj, maybe let's dive into the next session. There's just one thing that always comes up in this type of sessions when it comes to the electronic contracts management system. You find a lot of businesses in public, private sector, they don't really have, they've got all these, good systems in place. But when it comes to contracts management, you'd find that that section is sort of isolated. There is no proper system in place. Yes, they do have an ERP system where, they process, generate their orders, RFQs and what have you, but there's no designated contracts management system in place. So what would you say for people who have been curious about that, if there's any, systems that are recommended in the industry, and how they could also benefit from that front if they attend this course? Those that are saying, you know what, I fully understand what contracts management is all about, commercial contracts, but I just want to be more efficient, effective in what I do in managing my contracts. Or maybe I'm not even managing the contracts, but I'm actually on the ground running with the contracts, administration side of things. But I've always been wondering and bothered by all these administrative tasks that I find myself juggling with. So I want to know if there's a system that I can use for my business specifically to be more effective in this area. Any thoughts, recommendations, or anything that you can say?
I don't have it. Yeah, I don't have offhand. I don't have in my mind. But there are technologies, IT software companies, which I think I can recommend one or two. I don't have it in my head right now.
Yeah,
but
like
there are
Coupa, for
companies.
instance?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, so they do supply contract management software. But before getting in, we can also run a contract management course, Truman, for those who want to understand how your contracts are run. Contract management is a different course where we would talk about, which is not connected to this course, where we were talking about the pre-award, award, and post-award phase. That's a very beautiful topic, and I can share inputs on that too. But before we wind up, Truman, I just wanted to add is we can also have people from finance, people from marketing who really want to understand the commercial part of it. Absolutely. These are the also guys. So these guys could also be a part of it. And as you said, project, supply chain, people from tender and bidding document segment. These are the guys who would really benefit. Commercial directors, commercial contracts head, anybody from the legal who wants to understand basics of all these guys could be, for them it would be very, very, very relevant, this course, as far as commercial contracts is concerned. How do you manage them? How do you manage your risk? How do you bring in efficiency? And finally, protecting the assets of the company, interests of the company. That's what your contract.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Manoj. I think you've sort of covered everything. So yes, maybe not to divulge any systems, so that we just give you just enough to attend the session.
We can do that.
So if you need more information, then
Sure.
you know what to do.
Absolutely.
All right, Manoj, thank
you,
you so
Truman.
much once again. And thank you to all the attendees that managed to attend the previous session. We are going to see you in November. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you, Truman. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Manoj.
Take care.